Judith Sullivan, Policy, Litigation, and Legislation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Budo. So I referred to my previous comments to the public and to my fellow board members about the chronology that occurred with respect to 1642, 1643, the medical cannabis policy, and finally the abolishing of the religious holidays in place of the new United States guidelines on what religious holidays we should observe in public schools. I also had recounted in that comment earlier about the number of meetings that have taken place for the Policy, Legislative, and Litigation Committee. There have been almost weekly meetings in our efforts to address these issues, mostly on masking. And like I said earlier, I'm happy to report that we did reach an agreement with administration about the masking policy, which is on the website for parents, guardians, teachers, administration. Either contact the board president, Mr. Rashika, and if they both feel it's appropriate, the comments can be directed to me. Board members are free to comment and contact me directly if they had further questions. I did want to address a couple of things on support for Ms. LaForgia, and I also want to address the comment that someone had asked in the audience for me to talk about what I've been studying on the curriculum. So let me start with Ms. LaForgia. So I have never been on a board where I've received a letter of no confidence, or at least not directed at me, but it was directed at the board president. I have sat on many private and public boards for probably the past 20 years. I've sat on private boards for companies that have thousands of employees, 400 stores. I've sat on private, public charity boards where we advocate for environmental issues in the communities. And I've never seen a letter of no confidence before. It's never happened to me before. So I was quite shocked, actually, when I read the letter, because as a professor and as a logician and as a lawyer, it was filled with hyperbole, implicit and untested premises, and sweeping generalizations. And if you recall from my comments at the previous meetings, my issue with the curriculum was that I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time to read the thousands of pages of material. In fact, as I said at the last meeting, some of the material wasn't uploaded on the 16th as represented that it would be done. It wasn't uploaded until later on in the week. And like everyone else, I work full time. I also teach at night. So I just didn't have enough time. So I went in there with eyes open because I wanted to see what was going on. And I went into eyes open when I saw this letter of no confidence. And I was really taken aback by the lack of, in my personal opinion, the lack of discretion and good judgment that was in the letter. And I got a little rattled, to be honest, about these types of teachers standing in front of our children. It's really bothered me. It wouldn't be a letter that I would write on behalf of an entire organization that is standing in front of our children, especially when we are being told that they will be neutral, that they will engage in critical thinking, that they will listen to both sides. And so I'm still rattled about it. I'm still very concerned about some of the really big problems in critical thinking that were in the letter. And I was also really disappointed that no matter how hard we tried to be inclusive of the disabled, that the letter appeared to me to be a source of exclusion. There really was no way for the association to know if Ms. LaForgia had been granted an accommodation. There really is no way for any of us to know. Yet, they had an implicit premise in there that she had not been granted an accommodation or had not even asked for one. We don't know that. So if you answered and proposed that letter in my logic class, you would be given a big fat F on that letter because it has implicit premises in there that were not tested and can't be tested. So under Ms. LaForgia's leadership, I want to talk about some of the things that have happened this year that have been very positive. One, we hired a new superintendent. I said that last meeting, I'm going to say it again. That was a huge amount of work for a huge job. We did it under her leadership. Do you know how many hours and hours and hours and hours and hours she spent to try to get that done? And we picked a leader with a unanimous vote, which spoke highly of her leadership abilities. Second thing we did was we renewed the association's contract in record time, as far as my recent memory can go. The last renewal took 3 years to negotiate. This one was done in less than a year. And you know why? Because Ms. LaForgia was pushing to get things done quickly. We didn't want the teachers and the administration to suffer like they did last time for 3 years. So that's accomplishment number 2 that she had. And I am concerned that the letter of no confidence was issued, as some audience members have pointed out, within just a day or so of the vote on the curriculum. So letters of no confidence are symbolic. It also greatly disturbed me that people in the community thought that she was already impeached. People contacted me and said, is she out of office? That troubled me, because that means we're not communicating and you're not understanding what the processes are. So those are my comments on Ms. LaForgia. People that are, looking through her Facebook page, trolling her social media, seeing what she's saying, really has nothing to do with what she does here as a board member. Everyone is entitled to have their own private life. We're not the governor, we're not the president of the United States, we're just on a local school board, and she's just a local mom. So, we do try to be independent, and I have never seen anyone's personal agendas, at least on the president's side, coming into the meetings. So I'm asking the association to retract the letter. I am asking them to retract the letter. It serves as a poor example for our students that you didn't even attempt to meet with her to talk about this first before you wrote that letter. And it was sent at 4:40 p.m. to every single board member and some others on a Labor Day weekend. And I thought that was really an exercise of poor judgment and a lack of discretion. And if it were me and I was running this district, which I'm not, I would be rattled too. That to me shows a lack of good discretion and good judgment. And those are the kinds of things that come to people like me when you work for 37 years and you have a spotless record ethically. We are paid as lawyers to have good discretion and good judgment. And it has never been something that I've ever been challenged on. And it feels very odd to me that that letter is still out there. So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about Ms. King's comments about getting a letter from a medical doctor. It is not the language of the policy that is a letter from a doctor. It says medical professional. And this was something that was actually discussed at length, because we didn't want to exclude psychologists who are not doctors to be able to write a letter on behalf of a student or anyone else for that matter. So I want to be clear on that. It says medical professional, not medical doctor. And then finally, I want to say, I haven't had a chance. I'm going to try to go to some, with Mr. Rashika's permission, I'd like to go to some events. I'm not going to welcome back the students. I'm not going to say that, everyone's happy, because I haven't had a chance to look myself. And as a teacher of critical thinking, logic, philosophy, I need to look myself. I don't know if the students are really happy. And I'll wait to see myself when I get a chance to evaluate that. I can just rely on my superintendent's reports to me and perhaps some other parents and guardians in the community about that. I am happy to see that we have new student reps. Wow, is there a storm outside? I'm very supportive of students having a big voice. I'd like to see some more students at board meetings. Can you please come? Want to say welcome back to Mr. Rashika. I am super happy you are here. He is always available to me by telephone. He always calls me back right away. I try not to call him too much, only for really important things, and he's just been so fantastic in trying to get this masking policy issue resolved. And then finally, somebody did ask about the CRT things that I had found. Let me just correct that. I did not find I did not conclude that there were principles of CRT. I merely wrote a letter to Mr. Rashika because he had represented that we could always ask whether or not there were things in the curriculum, because he said it was sort of a working, and he even said it again tonight, we could continue to ask questions. So what I saw, and I'm going to do this every week. Every week I'm going to look at some courses again, and I really represented to myself that I would try to do this. I wasn't just going to put it on the shelf. So I took him up on his offer, and I wrote an email that I had 2 questions. I take no positions on the merits of the arguments, either way. I'm just looking to try to affirm or disaffirm that the principles of CRT are not in the curriculum. So if you look at, for example, the course called Current Events Evaluating Social Media in the Social Studies curriculum, Current Events Evaluating Social Media, one of the principles, by the way, which was cited in an American Bar Association journal that I had read about critical race theory, was that race is a social construct, and there is no such thing as race as a biological concept. In the course that I just cited, the district added a proposed learning activity which includes comparing textbooks on American history from different time periods and geographies to search for bias. And so I wondered, is this a lesson in CRT? Because it assumes that there is a bias. It assumes that there is a bias socially constructed in the textbooks. Maybe the answer is there's no bias. Maybe is we're just looking to see, the answer could be no, that there isn't any bias, but it wasn't clear to me from the question whether or not the implicit premise was that there was a bias. The next question I had was in the UP Global Wealth, Poverty, and Trade curriculum, UP Global Wealth, Poverty, and Trade curriculum. The district had an essential question which goes as follows. How is poverty caused or exacerbated by government policy or systemic or environmental conditions, and how might the effects of poverty be ameliorated? What demographics make up the impoverished in the United States? How are they reflective of broader socioeconomic trends? Isn't this a lesson in CRT? Because it assumes that there are implicit or inherent biases in systemic conditions, environmental conditions that are either causing poverty or exacerbating poverty. And I cite there to an article which I can provide, or Mr. Rashika can provide, that was published by Western Washington University, Journal of Educational Controversy. So it's not that I'm saying that, I'm not taking the merits of the argument either way. I'm just asking, since we are teaching certain tenets of critical race theory in these courses perhaps, does that mean, I'm actually asking my administration, does that mean that we're teaching critical race theory? They might say no, here's why. And I, as a lawyer, because we are always looking at both sides of the story, and as a professor in logic, tell me no, I might be wrong. So those are the things that I found. I wasn't planning on bringing it up tonight until Mr. Budo had mentioned it, and then someone had mentioned it in the audience. So I will do this every week. I hope that I can get some of my questions answered as we go on. I'm sure I will. And that's all I have. The policy committee is hoping to have another meeting this week because now we have to look at all of the other issues on the road back or road forward. Road forward you can find on the New Jersey Department of Education website, and or you can just type in road forward DOE, and you'll see there's certain principle guidelines, they're not laws, that they are suggesting that districts consider. So we're going to consider them in the policy committee. They include things like contact tracing. There is something there about vaccines, and there's some other ones that are, sort of mirror what we did last year with COVID, but not to the degree that we did last year. So we're trying to get a committee meeting together this week for that. I have some ideas on dates that people are available. And that's all I have. Thank you very much, Mr. Budo.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. All right.